Good evening, and welcome to the American Forum. I am Dr. Marnell Niles-Goins. I'm the Dean of the School of Communication here at American University. The American Forum is a place where we bring students together with prominent figures in media and politics to engage in civil discourse about the most important issues facing young people today in politics, in media, and in democracy. The American Forum is nonpartisan and it's student-led, and it's a co-production between American University School of Communication and the Kennedy Political Union. The topic of tonight's event is certainly timely as we welcome two AU alumni who played key roles in the innovative Kamala HQ social media campaign for Kamala Harris during her 2024 presidential run. I would like to thank KPU Director Isha Mehta and her team for making tonight possible. I would also like to thank Professor Jane Hall and her team at SOC. If you don't know, Jane is a longtime moderator and executive producer of American Forum. She and SOC have worked with KPU for many years to produce numerous wonderful American Forums together. Please be aware that this program is being recorded and the full recording will be made available later today, well maybe not today, but later, on the SOC YouTube channel and social media sites. You can also find more information on the American Forum website, americanforum.org. There are a few other crucial members of SOC that I would like to thank for helping to make this American Forum possible. Thank you to our Film and Media Arts Division Director, Professor Larry Engel, and the FMA Division for sponsoring the reception after the forum. I hope to see you there. Thank you to Jacob Audouin, Matt Wooten, and the whole SOC tech team, as well as Tia Millage from our Comms and Outreach Office for all of their hard work. And most importantly, a big thank you to all of you in the audience for coming to the American Forum this evening and supporting the work of SOC and KPU. I will now turn things over to Isha Mehta, Director of KPU. Isha.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Isha Mehta and I'm the Director of the Kennedy Political Union, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all and to introduce tonight's event, Kamala HQ and Beyond. Moderating tonight's event is Professor Jane Hall, an associate professor in the School of Communication. She specializes in media and politics and is the longtime moderator and executive producer of American Forum. Before joining AU, she was an award-winning journalist for major publications such as the LA Times, where she was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. I'm also thrilled to introduce our guests. Parker Butler is a managing partner at Luminary Strategies in New York City. He previously served as the director of the Rapid Response Team on the Harris-Walz presidential campaign, leading the team behind @KamalaHQ accounts. Parker was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 in 2025 for his work in driving the campaign's viral brat phenomenon and messaging around Project 2025. He also worked for the DNC and the Biden 2020 campaign and is a 2020 graduate from the AU School of Public Affairs. Arlie Sugar is the director of the Digital Rapid Response Team at the Democratic National Committee, overseeing the DNC's brand independent account, FactPost News. She was previously a video lead for @KamalaHQ, as well as a digital intern in the office of the vice president. Arlie is a 2023 graduate and a 2023 graduate at the School of Communication, where she studied film and media arts. After the event, we invite KPU staff and VIPs to join us at the front for a brief meet and greet and photo reception. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Jane Hall and our special guests, Parker Butler and Arlie Sugar.
Hello, everybody, and thank you to the Dean for those wonderful remarks, and welcome to our guest. I want to add a couple of logistics myself, too. As the Dean told you, we're recording. I want to be sure everybody's turned off your cell phones. And a few people we've had guests reach for those. So want to be sure. And also, there's no other audio or video recording allowed. Okay. As I was telling our wonderful guests, we have students here who are going into and already into politics and media policy, students from the School of Public Affairs, the School of Communication, at all the different divisions here, and they've got a lot of questions for you. What we'll do is we'll start with a few questions from the students in my class, and then we'll go around the room. The mic wranglers, where are the mic wranglers? Mic wranglers, okay. Oh, I see, there they are, okay. So just wait until they get to you, and people have begun to stand, so just stand. And tell us your name and what your major is, and then ask your question, and they will get to you with the mics. Let me see if there's anything else I need to check on. Okay, so as we've said, this is pretty topical. Let me see if there's any other thing I need to add. All right, there we go. Let me get to the questions, which is really the important part here. So, what are your takeaways from the election results we've just had with Zohran Mamdani, as well as Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill winning their races? Social media clearly played a role. What do you think, first of all, about Mamdani's campaign? How would you rank the social media in that? And can you make any comparison to what you all did with Kamala HQ? That's 3 questions, which I say you shouldn't usually do, but I just did.
Oh, good. So I think the elections this week show that Democrats are finally getting their groove back. It's been a very tough year to be a Democrat, right? And I think when you look at a campaign like Zohran Mamdani's, I don't think that he would be where he is right now if not for his digital strategy and the social strategy that he deployed. I mean, his ability to drive impressions online is really what allowed him to win that primary against Andrew Cuomo and a million other candidates. I live in New York City right now, so I've been witnessing it firsthand. And, it shows that social strategy is the future for Democrats. I think that it's taken a while sometimes for the party to come around to this. Certainly, we did what we could last year in terms of trying to adapt to the information environment and bring Democrats into, a newer age. And I think that, we're starting to see that other campaigns are starting to see that as well. And I think that that's really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of just,
you were at the DNC. You were there now. You tell us a little bit what you were doing on election night.
Yeah, so I was there on Tuesday, kind of in the boiler room, as we call it, live reacting to everything that was going on. As was mentioned, I run at Fact Post News, which is kind of like a brand independent new venture that we're trying at the DNC. And so it was really just very exciting to be able to be making these live race calls and have them all be, going the way that we wanted them to. And yeah, I think as Parker said, it's just such a testament to digital strategy and having that kind of, it's the new grassroots feeling, of having a successful online strategy that then really bubbles up into real life and becomes something incredible. So yeah.
What about the governor's race? Because people have been now saying, who's the new strategy? Who's the new? I mean, those are 2 women who won, who were centrists and women, the first woman governor. What do you think about that in terms of, do we have to make a choice? Do the Democrats have to make a choice between those 2 kinds of races that they ran? Or what do you all see about that?
So I don't think that they have to make a choice necessarily. What works in New York City is not necessarily what's going to work statewide in a state or Commonwealth like Virginia. But I do think that what we're seeing right now is a national environment, right? Zohran Mamdani is one example because he was able to win a primary against other Democrats and use social strategy to do that. But when you look at, the general elections in this past week, you see a national environment where I think that Trump has kind of lost a lot of the sort of shine that he had last year, in large part because his digital strategy, 1, has not kept up. And 2, I think, you see, for example, one thing that really stuck out to me I saw recently, Trump's disapproval has taken a real sharp increase in the last several weeks, right? And I think one thing that you notice when you look at that is that it happened right around the time that the demolition of the East Wing started to go viral online. And you started to see those images reach a lot of non-political people. And I think it put an image in people's head that really matched what they're seeing in terms of the policies and the utter destruction that he's wreaking on people's everyday lives. And I think that virality cannot be understated. I think there are a lot of people who thought, oh, that, it doesn't affect people's lives, like it's just kind of, it seems trivial, but those kinds of things go viral and they set trends and they reach people in a way that when you talk about more substantive issues, even though they're very important, they don't necessarily reach people on their news feeds anymore because of how social media is configured.
Mm-hmm. Take us back, because this was something all the students wanted to know. You created the first fan cam, I think, of the campaign. Talk to us about that, and then talk about, we might as well ask you how you all got involved, whether you knew each other. Tell us a little bit about how you came to do this, and also being there with the fan cams, and then how big a factor was going after Trump and responding so rapidly and ironically to what Trump was doing in Kamala HQ.
Yeah, well, that's a couple different things. I think we should start with kind of how we met and all of that. We actually never spoke or met at AU, but then Parker was working, he had been contracting for the DNC and then was eventually brought on full-time to the DNC. He ended up interviewing me when I was interviewing at the DNC, and I had to pretend that I had not stalked him on like LinkedIn and been like, oh, you work at it, or you went to AU too, crazy. So yeah, then obviously got hired at the DNC. We began to like work together way more, and I was on a different team, but ended up getting
I took you on.
getting taken onto Parker's team. That rapid response team eventually became the Kamala HQ team when we both moved to Wilmington, Delaware, and the campaign had ramped up. And in terms of the fan cam of it all, I have always kind of had an obsession with just fan cams and like the language that they like. It's a language, right? That's like on the internet, and I just find it so interesting how you can communicate through them. And so I knew that like once Kamala Harris was at the top of the ticket, I really wanted to try to incorporate them because people were already doing it themselves. That grassroots energy was there, the excitement was there, and the first ones that were really popping off online were not ones that we had created officially, but I just saw that excitement and I really wanted to, make some of my own. I had never tried it before. And my first one that I ever made was actually the first one that we posted. So
Wow.
Yeah, and it just took off from there. So really
Tell us about
exciting.
the content of that, and then the whole brat thing that happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the content of it, I really tried to stick to a formula to make sure that it wasn't, just vibes. Like I would always do, 5 or 6 seconds of a snippet of her speech, whatever was the most important thing from whatever rally she was at, and then kind of like remixing a really popular audio that would get like a shock factor from viewers on TikTok, like, oh my gosh, the official Harris campaign used this cool underground song, that's crazy. And then just clips of her, and that formula seemed to work out pretty well. We did a lot I did one of Obama that did really well. It got like 23 million impressions. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, I'll let you answer that.
What about the brat, and what about
brat of
the
it all.
irony of Trump, the rapid response and
Sure.
sort of stalking Trump to his disadvantage?
Yeah, so the backstory on Brat is, the day the ticket switch happened, obviously we didn't know what was going to happen. And we had about a couple hours to completely rebrand the account from Biden HQ into Kamala HQ. And so we had to make some very quick decisions about what that was going to look like in terms of an online identity. And what happened in the afternoon after Joe Biden had dropped out and Kamala Harris announced her candidacy was Charlie XCX tweeted, "Kamala is brat." That just happened organically. And I remember sending this in a group chat with campaign leadership and a lot of folks in there, and saying, "Guys, you don't understand. This is like a really big deal." And
How old were the people you were messaging about this?
How old?
How old, were they older than you?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. This was like the leadership of the campaign. So, couple decades older, maybe. I don't know, I can't. But yeah, so I think, explaining that this is a really big cultural moment. This is an example of Democrats finally, which they do very rarely, but finally tapping into culture, right? And so when we rebranded Kamala HQ, we had to like make a banner and a profile photo and stuff. And so, I decided to design the banner to look like the Brat album. Running that through approvals was very interesting. I don't think they necessarily understood what it was, but this is an example where they just trusted us to just run with it. They put young people in charge of social media, and they just let us kind of cook, right? We had a very relaxed approvals process. For folks who've worked on campaigns or in companies before, like it can be pretty rigorous and they can kill your ideas. But we actually had an approvals process where we sent stuff on a text chain, and after 5 minutes, if no one objected to the content, then it went out into the world.
Wow.
So it allowed us to move really quickly and to try a lot of things that you may have seen on your social media feeds that most campaigns probably wouldn't do.
Wow. I mean, I read that to get approval of a Hillary Clinton tweet took like many memos and just a whole other process.
Yeah.
Kalia in my class had a question. Where are you, Kalia? Is that on?
That's okay, I can talk.
We can hear you.
Well, no, let's be sure we have it because we're recording.
Is that working? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kalea. I'm a public relations and political science double major here at American. Thank you both so much for being here. I know we were all super excited when this got announced. My question is, with the social media strategy leaning so heavily into Gen Z humor and tactics, how did y'all and the team as a whole balance the need for Harris to be seen as a serious political candidate, but also keeping that fun humor and appealing to younger voters?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it was definitely a balancing act, right? Because we absolutely, that was at the forefront of our minds at all times. I think that for us, it was interesting because, you're kind of in this catch-22 where the things that go viral are the things that are young and fun and crazy and funny, and the things that are a little bit more serious and buttoned up don't really take off as much on social. So it's kind of you're trading one for the other of, oh, do I want to present this person in a very serious manner and not get as many impressions, or do I want to do this trend and really have it pop off and get into the algorithm? But I think that we did I think that we did a great job at kind of walking the line with her specifically, and just knowing how to present her in a way that was becoming, because I do think that sometimes people take trends too far and it's maybe not totally becoming of the elected official. So yeah, it was definitely a balancing act, but.
Well, and also I would say, the advantage of having an account like Kamala HQ is that can be its own thing. It almost took on a life of its own, that people kind of intrinsically understood as not Kamala Harris herself, right? She had her own account. And I think that allowed us to do that as well. Another thing is we didn't, yes, there was a little bit of mention of Brat, but we weren't leaning super hard into it, because once you lean into a joke a little bit too much, it can become a little cringe. So we tried to be very tactful about that. And even the coconut stuff, for example, right? We didn't mention that at all.
We didn't say it once.
That was a lot of folks doing that themselves online. And so it was a little bit of okay, mention the joke a little bit, but don't lean too hard in, because you're actually going to kill the vibe if you do that.
Sarah had a question about process, but she had another piece of it. Where's Sarah Lopez? Just we talked a little bit about process, but I thought you had a really great second part to what you wanted to ask about.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah Lopez. Sorry, I didn't know if it was working. My name is Sarah Lopez. I'm studying journalism and political science. Thank you so much for being here. Obviously, everyone's super excited about it. So you spoke a little bit about how quickly and more relaxed the approval process was, and you actually just mentioned that Kamala Harris did have her own account. In terms of getting these ideas approved, filming the videos, editing them, and then getting them uploaded, how close was she to that process? And was she ever aware of these ideas before they were being released?
So it depends on the piece of content, right? Obviously a presidential campaign is like a massive operation. There's thousands of people ultimately involved. And so, a lot of the content, the candidate, and this goes for all campaigns, I should say, the candidate doesn't necessarily see it unless they're very online, which most candidates are not. I would say the exception to that would be when we actually did do some content that, involved her being on camera, right? When we launched, when we did her reacting to certain clips and things like that. That's where that would happen. But for the most part, it's sort of there's a bit of a separation. And I think that's sort of how campaigns are usually structured. That being said, when things do go very viral, it's pretty likely that in some way that's reaching the candidate. I think an example of this would be Project 2025, right? That's a thing that originated on our team in terms of the messaging around that and warning folks about this thing that Trump was planning if he were to take office. Unfortunately, he is enacting it. And that's a thing that it started out through Kamala HQ, but it actually became a core part of Vice President Harris's stump speech, right? So it depends on the thing, right? But if it goes viral enough, it can impact other parts of the campaign.
Yeah, I think she also did tend to hear about it from folks that she would meet with, which is just sillier, but it's definitely was cool to hear that anybody that she would meet with on the campaign, especially younger voters, would come up to her and be like, I love Kamala HQ, and she was just crazy. But
what about the Doritos and Tim Walz and those kinds of things? How did they both feel about that, and what impact do you think those things had? Do you know?
Well, you worked for Tim Walz.
I did work for Tim Walz. I ran Tim Walz's TikTok as well. I was moonlighting as Kamala HQ and also Tim Walz.
Wow. When did you sleep?
I'm caught up on sleep now. Don't worry about that. But I think in terms of the Doritos video, which I don't know if everyone here has seen, but
I bet this is an unusually large group of people, percentage-wise, will know about it.
They're at a Wawa together, and he hands her a bag of Doritos. Very sweet moment. A lot of that stuff was more so. That video was filmed by one of our videographers who was just camera on all of the time, and that's actually particularly a kind of unique video. We tended to do most on the road style content like that on iPhone, but that video in particular is filmed on a camera. But yeah, no, I think being on all the time, filming as much as you possibly can, as somebody that was on the road with Tim Walz, it's just whenever you can just whip out a phone and film a moment, you never know what's going to go viral.
Are you responsible for the car and all those moments that people?
The car was a little bit more of a produced video.
This was about fixing, how to fix a car.
Yeah, he was doing he was fixing up his car as well as talking about just, election things. I can't really remember what exactly it was, but I did a lot of his videos. I got to travel with him quite a bunch, so it was really fun. I did there's this one video where he's cracking a Mountain Dew open.
And the
that
goal
was really
of that
fun.
was what? What was the goal?
I think on his account, and on Kamala Harris's personal account as well, we did do a lot of clips of their stump speeches and coverage of what they were saying on the trail. A lot of interactions with voters as well, but then there were videos that were way more just to show their personality and who they were really behind closed doors.
I guess what I'm asking is, was there ever a meeting? I mean, she called him coach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, looking at it as an outsider, it looked to me like that was sort of to say these people, you know, the dudes for Kamala idea. Was it ever an overt conversation, or you just were trying to show his humanity as well, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think with Tim Walz, he was just and is still just such a unique person. He's so himself and he's so genuine in everything that he does. Like, I really do mean that. He's a very down-to-earth person. And so I think with him specifically, there was not a lot that we had to do. Like, he was just so himself. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to some questions around the hall. Raise your hand and the mic ringers will get to you. Okay. So we go to the middle. I just see that person there. Stand up and tell us your name and your major, please.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Gracie Gilligan. I'm a double major in political science and music. But my question is, was it a choice that the communications team kind of made, or was it just something that happened that people ended up, I mean, the brand is Kamala HQ, everything kind of is Kamala other than when it's referred to as the Harris Walz campaign. Was there a decision to refer to her by her first name, or was that something that just ended up happening? Because, I mean, with most presidential candidates, like, people don't really call Joe Biden Joe. He's always referred to as Biden. So is that a decision that was made by the campaign, or was it something that just kind of happened probably because she's a woman?
So the campaign logo did have was Harris Walz. I think the Kamala HQ aspect was because the brand was sort of informal. It was separate from Kamala Harris herself, but very much I think the campaign was mostly using her last name. But in general, I think it's because, I mean, you know, Bernie Sanders, for example, people call him Bernie. So I think it's just, it depends on the candidate, but I do think that for the most part, her last name was used on sort of the non-KHQ side of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, let's go to one of those two gentlemen in the back.
Hi, my name is Madrid. I'm a grad student in the Media, Technology, and Democracy program. I'm also a former student of the Media and Politics class with Jane Hall, Professor Hall. My question is about the relationship between social strategy and policy content. And did policy content perhaps take a backseat because of the algorithm?
I think that the policy piece was a little further upstream from where we were in terms of kind of being written into her speeches, and that was way before us in you know, like, the process. So, like, definitely when it reached us in terms of clipping her events, like, we were absolutely doing that and creating the content as her policies were, you know, coming out. But yeah, I think it was a little further upstream from us.
And also, I just say, I think the digital, I mean, there was so much content. I mean, at our peak, we were pumping out like hundreds of pieces of content every single day. And I think that, you know, a lot of times, you know, the focus may be on like the memes and like the, you know, the more like flashier stuff, right? Some of like the TikToks, for example. But ultimately, you know, we ran a program that had a ton of different types of pieces of content. We were filming direct-to-camera videos with students talking about how Project 2025 was going to, you know, take away student loan funding, and like so many things that were specific to particular communities and particular audiences. And so, you know, it was a wide variety of content that we were putting out. But of course, you know, I think, you know, generally because of the way TikTok works, because of the way, to your point, the way the algorithms work, sometimes the stuff that is more memeified is sometimes can rise to people's For You pages more often. But I think we definitely tried to focus on talking about policy, talking about you know, the stakes of the election as well.
What is the ratio of, something I read that you all said, the ratio of, you know, something that's viewed versus something that's liked, and you know the difference in impact. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that is a stat particularly that it means a lot to us, like to view ratio. You know, it's pretty simple, but like to view ratio, just the higher it is, the better the piece of content has been kind of received. We used to always find that videos of Trump would, go super viral, but the like to view ratio would be very low, just because, like, the way that I think about social media is very much kind of psychology based and like behaviorally based. So that's one of those things where you're seeing it in real time. People don't want to like put the stamp of like, I approve this message, I like this piece of content, onto, a video of Trump, but maybe like fan cams or other trends or videos with Kamala Harris herself where she's, speaking directly to the viewer. We're all, that was like a number that we really, really paid attention to, and the like to view ratio definitely tended to be a higher percentage on videos like that.
Does that translate into votes? I mean, I guess that's the other question. How can you tell how that, do you have a sense of what call to action, did you have a call to action in mind with all of these things?
So I think the way we see it is like, oftentimes, and this is a great question because, we get asked all the time by, folks who are sort of maybe our superiors on campaigns and things like that. They're like, well, how do you know that you're reaching, this group of voters or whatever? And I think that we have to think of social media less as, sort of geo-targeting specific groups of voters and more about a new form of communication that replaces the sort of way of talking through traditional media, right? Like there's so much of campaigns that's structured around getting the clip in the local media, article, or getting the hit on cable television. Like that's still how things are really structured on campaigns, even in 2025. And I think what we're focused on is how do we replace that, which is in large part designed to reach, in the presidential campaign, a national audience, but to do it on a way that's actually reaching them on their mobile devices, right? So I think we think of it less as, is this going to reach, this specific, community of 1,000 people in Michigan, and more about how are we influencing overall narratives nationally, because those narratives are going to trickle down. Even if you're not like a regular TikTok user, the narratives that originate on TikTok, you're probably going to hear about them in some form in an election if it's pervasive enough. So that's how we thought of it.
So can you tell me an example about, and you said about Trump, you mean the videos you all were putting out against Trump did not?
Yes, like even if we would just post a simple clip of him, saying something at a rally, like those would definitely have a lower like to view ratio. But yeah, to Parker's point, I mean, this is like, I think about this all the time. The internet is real life, and it's a new form of communication, and my goal always when I'm creating content is I want to, number one, get on people's algorithms, like the East Wing content that's really been breaking through to non-political audiences, and just like stop the noise and make sure that we're reaching folks. And the other thing that I always want to do is be giving people nuggets that they can take into their real life conversations. So I want, whatever piece of content that I'm putting out, if it's high performing and gets a lot of impressions, I want to like arm people with something that they take into, to the Thanksgiving table and talk to their uncle about, oh yeah, did you see Trump is tearing down the East Wing? Like, and have that kind of like weave more into like the fabric of their reality.
Well, Mandami did a lot of organizing. I think one of the things that, he did a lot before, and I've seen where he talks about listening to the voters first, and then, of course, using the whole idea of affordability, which he said he heard over and over and over again. It's not one thing or the other, I guess, is it? I mean, in terms of social media and organizing, it's clearly not, but... No,
they go hand in hand, right? I mean, Zohran Mamdani had tens of thousands of organizers on the ground, but his social media program allowed him to, what I like to call it, you're cultivating the vibes, right? Like you're sort of like running the like air support for an actual on the ground operation. It all goes hand in hand.
Good, okay. Yes, we've got a whole bunch of questions here. Should we go to, let's go to one more person from my class and then we'll go around. Pakriti had a question that fits so well here. She's in the front row. Aiden, she's in the front row. And then we'll go to other people.
Hi. My name is Prakriti, and I'm a grad student at School of Education, International Training and Education program. I also take class Politics and Media with Professor Hall. I'm so glad to be here and hearing you both speak. My question is, every women leader online faces what feels like a public permission slip for criticism, be it appearance to tone. What lessons have you learned about reclaiming dignity of women in digital spaces that often feed off tearing it down? Thank you.
That's a good question. I think that Kamala Harris did a really, really good job of taking up space both in real life and digitally as a woman. She, made a lot of very specific choices about the things that she wore and the things that she said in order to kind of like detract from, not have her identity not define her as much as the things that she was saying and thinking. And I think that definitely that was something that we were so conscious of on the campaign, just generally. So yeah, it definitely is not an easy, there's no easy answer or correct answer to that, I guess, but it was definitely something that we were very, very aware of on the campaign. And I think that just having her lead and set the tone with, the way that she presented herself was so, so important, and kind of changed my view of that notion generally. I don't know if you have thoughts.
Well, I mean, an example of this is like Biden HQ, right? Like we also were running that account, and like the dark brand and stuff, like obviously like you can't do that with a woman candidate because of the increased scrutiny that's given, and I think that's absolutely true. So.
Well, there's also more online hate towards women.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had to deal with that specifically around her, but just in general, it's much worse. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to some others on the aisle there.
Hello, my name is Adi DePaulo. I'm a combined degree student in political communication and data science for political science. And I wanted to ask, kind of reflecting on everything you both did to build Kamala HQ, what would you do differently if you had the chance to do it again? Obviously, I know it was definitely not a normal campaign timeline, but how would you adjust the strategy, specifically regarding some of the younger audience who felt that it could have been a little bit performative or lacking in policy?
So to your point, we were at a very short timeline, and I think that that impacted a lot of the decisions that were made, and we had to do so many different things in a very short period of time. I think like you see, the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do to win back a lot of different groups of people, including young people, right? I think your point about performativeness is well taken. It's really important. I think young people have a distrust of both political parties naturally, and in order to win them back, to your point, I mean, Zohran Mamdani has shown he's able to do that through his campaign and through his digital strategy. So, I think we need to invest even more in social, and I think the way you do that and the amount of content that you put out is really important. Like I said, we had a social program that was doing so many different things in terms of putting out all different types of content. But I think that it's still not enough. There's so much more to invest in when it comes to social, when it comes to the Democratic Party and Democratic politics. And I think that we're only at the very beginning of a process of reforming how we communicate with voters in a way that meets where folks are this decade.
Yeah.
If you had to, is there anything that you would do differently looking back? One of the critiques, and it seems unfair in many ways, but in retrospect, people have said she should have been talking more about inflation and affordability, and there was that whole issue of how far did she want to separate herself from Biden, and you were doing the social media that reflected that, but do you think, I mean, some people have said, well, they got the cool factor, but did they reach the bros who then went, I mean, do you feel responsible for any of the bro thing that happened, or was that just a function of something that would be impossible to really try to do in retrospect? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think like, look, like the trends that we saw happen last year, whether it was young men who, you know, detracted from the Democratic Party, whether it was various, you know, whether it was Latino communities or you know, so many different communities that Democrats lost ground with, you know, last year. Those were trends that were years in the making, and I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind. In order to make a difference in terms of winning back those communities, it's going to be years in the making, right? We saw good progress happen this.
Tell me about the difference in Mandami because there still was a split, I gather, between younger and older in college and non-college. Do you think he made progress having a sort of probably the hindsight of what happened in 2024?
Made progress
with these groups that went more away from you all.
Absolutely. Well, you know, again, I think when you look at like young men, for example, detracting from the Democratic Party, I don't think that was a statement specifically about any one candidate. I think that's a statement about their lack of trust in the party. And I think in order to improve with young men, with all young people, like the Democratic Party has got to win back their trust through and actually communicate to them in the mediums that we use. So I think Zohran Mamdani absolutely showed a blueprint to do that, certainly in New York City, but we got to, you know, there's all different, every candidate's got to run their own race, and it's a big, diverse country out there, and everyone's got to run a different strategy and speak in a way that's authentic, because that's what works online.
But I think that's the most important thing that means the most is the pairing of having an authentic candidate that's really speaking to issues that folks care about, like affordability, inflation, economic issues generally, and pairing it with an authentic online strategy that makes sense with their voice. You know, you can't have virality and you can't have like good content without an effective and authentic messenger providing, you know, the ammunition for the content. So I think it's really like a two-track path for candidates and should be exciting.
I would assume people are coming to you and saying, okay, so how can I make so-and-so have a great online presence, right?
Yes, and sometimes it's like, how do I do what Gavin Newsom's doing online or whatever, Zohran Mamdani? And the answer is you don't want to replicate exactly what someone's doing online. That's going to be inauthentic. You know, no other candidate can do what Gavin Newsom's doing online, because what Gavin Newsom's doing online feels true to his personality and the you know, what he's trying to give off.
Right, everybody knows what he's doing, right? He's writing in all caps.
He's imitating Trump, yeah. And you know, it's great because it matches the energy that he gives off in real life. It makes sense, right? Gavin Newsom imitating Donald Trump and taking him on head to head feels right. And so if you approach a strategy saying, how do I imitate this one candidate, you're already not going to succeed. You have to find the strategy that is authentic to the voice of that particular candidate or elected official.
Okay, lots of good questions. All right, let's see, where should we go? There's so many here. All right. Okay, so we got to go to a different part of the room. Let's go to that person right there. Right there.
Hi, I'm going to echo everyone and say thank you so much for coming and speaking to all of us. My name is Catherine Volk. I'm an SIS major, but I do a lot of work in campaigns. With typical campaigns, you see really three, not distinct, but portions of the campaign being candidate identification, you know, name recognition, persuasion, and then get out the vote. Did you find that those three, I guess, time frames within the campaign affected your use of social media, and that the Kamala HQ changed to accommodate those times? Or was the central idea of Kamala HQ overall to just build enthusiasm and really hone in on the get out the vote aspect? Because I know that I saw that was the primary goal, at least visually, and I know a lot of my colleagues also thought the same. So I was just curious on what your take on that was.
Yeah, I think, you know, with 107 days, it's definitely hard to lay the groundwork as much as you want to on name ID and on, anything but get out the vote. We did a lot of content around her policies, Trump's policies, and the like. But yeah, I think definitely because of the condensed timeline, it all did kind of roll into one, and we were just posting so much. So it would be a little bit of everything every day, I feel. But definitely, like, GOTV content towards the end was definitely ramped up.
Okay, let's go to that gentleman there on the aisle.
Hi, my name is Gabe. Thank you guys for coming. I'm a senior studying journalism and political science. We're pretty much a year since the election, I think, like actually the other day. What was it like transitioning from like really being in it? Like, I think when you're in a campaign, like you're in it, and I think we all experienced that here too with being such a political school. So like, how did you guys transition from, the loss and then back into like the real world and also into the job market and like real life and stuff?
It's a great question.
That is a good question. In terms of transitioning just into regular life afterwards, it's definitely was not easy. I think I was not normal for a while afterwards in most conversations. But I still do a lot of the day-to-day. I am running a rapid response account currently, so I still am pretty in it on a day-to-day basis, as most of my friends and family can attest to. I'm usually like, what? But yeah, it's definitely odd coming out of a campaign. I think the one thing that I did not realize about doing a presidential campaign, I had never done a presidential before, is just that it really affects who you are as a person. And I had always heard that going into it and been like, people are, exaggerating. I still definitely, I think about it every single day. What could I have done differently? What could I have improved on? So yeah, definitely, at least I can say 1 year and 1 day out, I am still thinking about it. But
That's right, it's 1 year and 1 day.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just add, even though it becomes so much of who you are, like, do not let that detract you from joining a campaign. If you're ever considering doing it, do it, especially right now.
Yes.
This is, like, we need you. Like, the Democratic Party needs you if you're a Democrat. Like this, there's so much out there right now where it's like, it is like the Wild West out there. People don't know where things are headed. They don't know the next communication strategy. They don't. There's so much to claim and to do and to innovate with.
Yeah.
And I just really encourage folks, we were in our early 20s doing this. Like, you can just do things, right? And so.
Campaigns are a great place to grow, and if you're a self-starter and there's a role to be filled and you're there, you should just fill it and do it. That's something that I really want everyone here to know, especially I was a film major. I did not do social media. I did not do communications as it were in college. I didn't know that you could do digital political digital on a campaign. Until I actually just started doing it. And I think that, the thing that is so special to Gen Z and people of our generation is you really don't realize, maybe I never realized, how much of an asset it is to be a digital native. Like, you just know innately what works online and what doesn't work online, and that is not a skill that everyone has, especially people even a couple years older than you. Like, the more tapped in you are to just being fluent in online is really, really important and special. And yeah, I would echo that. We need you, and we're always hiring. So.
Well, so you were concentrated in photography, I gather, from talking to Professor Jaswal. How does that relate, do you think?
It doesn't, is my answer. I really had an interest in photography, and I was a film and media arts major, so I spent a lot of time in the dark room, and then I kind of, I was very interested in video editing as well, which is really where the connection happened. I started out doing produced video, both in Kamala Harris's official site office and then at the DNC. But yeah, that was more of the connector, is that I started doing video, and then I transitioned more into TikTok and more social strategy generally. But yeah, no, I took a very hard turn from doing analog, like
In the dark
developing
room,
photos
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Parker?
So I was at SPA, I was political science major. I didn't know, so I worked in the Biden campaign in 2020. I actually took off a semester at AU to do that.
You were interning, or
it was a full-time job.
It was a full-time job.
Yeah, and I was a rapid response video editor for Joe Biden's accounts against Trump in 2020. We won that one. I didn't realize until then, you can get paid to post. That was so like Arlie said, we're just digital natives. You just kind of post. I'm sure can relate. You just kind of post and that's what you do. But when you don't realize how much of an asset that is to any organization or campaign or company that you want to join. The people who are 10 years older than you, 15 years, they will never have that. And I think that, to Arlie's point, you need to know that. So, I was 20 and working on the campaign, and I fell in love with it, and we won the election. I went back to AU to graduate, so it was kind of I knew I wanted to work in politics, but didn't realize there was this whole world out there of digital strategy, which was emerging at the time in 2020.
So you graduated in 2020, yeah.
I graduated in 22.
22. Oh,
He went back to school after.
That's right.
the
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so AU to me. I say that with great love for AU. Okay. Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's go to a guy in the back there in the last of the front section, please.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm in grad school studying political science, and I know you've mentioned that there's a lot of groups of voters that Democrats have lost support from. I was just wondering if there was a group you thought it might be easier for the party to increase its support from again?
I don't think any group is ever inherently easy to win votes. I never want to think of it that way. But I do think that when you look at young people in particular, that's not a party that's not a group of voters that naturally wants to vote for what we're seeing come out of the Republican Party right now. I think that's a group of voters that, like I said, distrust both parties. A lot of us are very progressive in nature, and I think it's a lack of trust in politicians and in political parties. And I think in order to win them back, you have to have authenticity and you have to have a smart social strategy that actually reaches them. So again, I don't think it's necessarily easy to win back young people, but I do think that that's a group of voters that they're deciding between voting for a lot of them are deciding between voting for a Democratic candidate or just staying at home.
And I think the digital strategy piece is really important there. I think a lot of young voters maybe feel a disconnect with the candidates that they're being offered, and I think that a really good and clear digital strategy where it feels almost conversational, where the voters are saying whatever they're displeased about, and the candidate is kind of I think that's one thing about the Zoran campaign that was really effective was how back and forth almost it was. So I think that that's something that people, I would say, really respect, and it means a lot in terms of the trust there.
What about Donald Trump and his social media? Do you consider that, I don't even know how to ask the question, but some of the really hateful things he's done with the cats, with the whole falsehood. Do you find, I guess my question is, you said people who are following you don't like it, but what do you think is the appeal to the people that are the MAGA people? And how is that? How can you, if you were a Democratic candidate, how would you approach sort of countering some of this stuff? I mean, there's so much stuff out there that they're pumping out too on the other side.
Well, I mean, that's exactly. I mean, it's not a coincidence that Donald Trump, who is he's a very online person, right? His 2016 campaign was on Twitter, right? He is a very online person. I don't think it's a coincidence that his ability to dominate narratives, right, to control the conversation. It feels like Democrats are often always responding to him, and obviously it makes sense right now because he's in office, but even when he wasn't in office, it's he's still the center of attention, and it's because he's a creature of the internet. It's because his campaign was a creature of the internet. And so I think, it's not that Democrats should adopt the policies or the crassness of of Donald Trump and MAGA. But it is to say that those strategies of throwing the rule book out the window and just no holds barred, like calling things out for what they are and not filtering things through like a million different memos, like you mentioned, like it just has to feel authentic. Like people just, the information environment has changed so much in the past like 3 years, right? Like in 2020, like I mentioned, I worked on that campaign. TikTok wasn't even a thing then. Like, I mean, we think about 2024 was the first presidential campaign where where campaigns were actually using TikTok. So things have changed so much so quickly. And I think that Democrats have just been sometimes slow to catch up. And because Trump is a creature of the internet, he's been ahead of the curve in some ways.
I think that, just to add to that, he knows how to command attention so well. He knows how to command attention and command an audience, and I think that rapid response aspect, I mean, he himself is rapidly responding to anything that you hear in the news, seriously, in real time.
Right, yeah.
He responded to us.
Yeah, he did,
Tell about that. You were telling me in the green room about that.
Well, there are just some instances where we would post some stuff on Kamala HQ, and we had to watch all of his rallies, by the way, like literally every minute of his speeches, and he spoke for 3 hours at every rally. So we had to do that, and sometimes he would speak on like the West Coast, and so we were up until like 3 a.m. watching him. And but there were moments where we would post something, and then we'd see at his rally, the Kamala campaign, their social media team posted this thing, and so it was just fun. I mean, but that's the point. Is like he is so in it, and I think that Democratic campaigns need to also be just as in it, right? They need to be in the conversation, and I think, but that goes to the point. He has really blazed new trails in terms of understanding that attention is everything when it comes to how people understand the world around them. If you're not earning attention, you might as well not even be saying anything online, right? Everything's about attention, and that's in some ways can be bad to folks' questions about talking more about policy and things like that. I agree. We should have a conversation about policy, but we live in an information environment where sometimes it's the less substantive things that get more attention. And Democrats have to learn how to compete in that world and also hopefully maybe turn the conversation back in a little bit more substantive way.
So I have to ask you, whom do you think is going to be running for president in 2028? And does it include Kamala Harris?
I have no idea. I think the answer that she has said is that who knows? I think that's what she's been saying. So.
Well, she's putting out, she's putting out things saying, "Help me continue my work." Mm-hmm. So you don't have any inside track as to her decision.
No inside track.
What about the other people that might be running? You probably aren't going to want to answer this, but who's good in the Democratic Party who on social media? I'll put that to you. Can you say that? Like, who do you think has been particularly good? And
well, I mean, first of all, in 2020, I think it's going to be extremely crowded. Like it's.
I've heard Dan Merica was here with us a few weeks ago. He said he thought there might be 30 people.
Yeah.
Oh, I think even more than that in the beginning stages.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the beginning. Yeah. I mean, in 2020, it was like maybe like 20 people at its peak. I mean, it's going to be even bigger than that. I mean, I don't know who, but I do think that whoever it is needs to be someone who understands the internet, understands social media, understands and hires people who understand it. Because if Democrats do not improve their ability to communicate online, then we're going to continue to fall further and further behind. I think it's a real emergency. I think we've talked about Zoran. Again, I think Gavin Newsom has been able to garner attention online. Like there are people who are figuring this out, but it's got to be like every candidate's got to figure this out.
Every candidate has
to communicate on the internet. Yeah.
What do you think about Mikey Sherrill and Spanberger? Did they have to communicate on the internet as well as in their states?
They did communicate, and I also think, like I said, it is a in a presidential election, it is the highest of highest turnouts, right? I mean, when you're competing with someone like Donald Trump, who turns out low propensity voters, people who usually never vote, you've got to really be able to inspire people who do not normally turn out to vote. I think that's the problem, that's an issue that Democrats have to confront right now, which is we do really well among voters who are constantly paying attention to the political news. They'll turn out in every off-year election, they'll turn out in every midterm. That's why I think 2026 will hopefully go well for Democrats. But when it comes to time to that presidential election, and so many people are voting, you get more than 50% of the electorate turning out, that's where Democrats struggle. That's where Trump has been able to really tap into those less engaged voters. And the only way, in my opinion, to reach those voters truly is to have a good digital online strategy. I think in order to win young men back, you got to do things like go on streaming platforms, right? Where they're watching streamers. Like there's so many different avenues to reach these types of voters, but I think we shouldn't assume just because we've won in a maybe a lower turnout election that we have everything figured out. We still have a lot more to do in terms of reaching those less involved voters.
Okay, let's go to more questions. Okay, how about in the let's see, I can't really see. In the back there, somebody in one of the back rows. Let's see.
Hi, my name is Ben Austin. I'm a journalism student here. Obviously, at Kamala HQ, you guys were trying to appeal to young voters. I was wondering how you navigated the waters of kind of dealing with young voters who tended to be more critical of the genocide in Gaza in a campaign that was maybe a little less so.
Yeah, so I think one aspect to note is, so there's a campaign side and there's what we call the official side, right? So we were on the campaign side. Only the official side was, and obviously the candidate was able to talk about foreign policy. So the campaign itself was, campaign staffers were not, the focus was not on foreign policy. And so anything that was related to, like you mentioned, whether it was Gaza or any sort of foreign policy issue was talked about on the official side. And so I think you saw, when the vice president spoke about it, for example, she spoke about it, from an official side event. So those were different events. And so I think that was one thing just to keep in mind, just in terms of logistics. But yeah.
Okay, and she writes in her book about, you know about what she did when she took a position different from his, but she wasn't doing that online. She was doing that in her more official capacity, her more official account.
Well, and there were also online channels that were official.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. How about in the middle? Can we get to that young woman in the middle there?
Hi, my name is Clara Watson. I'm a senior and a communication studies major. And I was just wondering if there was a particular point during the campaign where you found yourself very conflicted about how to respond to something, or like what your next move would be and how you got through that.
I think in terms of, there were obviously always moments where curveballs were being thrown, et cetera. I think that the nature of our accounts specifically was so collaborative, and just genuinely being in person and being in an office with 13 people, being able to have a big conversation where we're like, well, if we say this, then this, and how do we go about talking about this issue? I think that that collaboration has always been really, really important, at least for me, with any sort of social strategy, is just being able to bounce ideas off of people. So yeah, I guess that's my answer to that.
One that comes to mind is when the Taylor Swift endorsement came in, which was right after the debate.
Yeah.
That was, obviously, first of all, the vice president won that debate, and that was an incredibly exhilarating moment for us in the office. And I remember we were posting all the debate clips, and there was so much content, and someone ran in the room and said, "Guys, go on Instagram right now." Someone pulled up Taylor Swift's Instagram page, and the photo of her with the cats and saying she's a cat lady and all that. It was a very incredible moment, and that was an example where our whole strategy that night was, we're going to post about the debate. Obviously Trump did the whole cats and dogs nonsense about whatever, and so we had to deal with that. But really, it completely turned just a minute later, and so everyone was talking about the Taylor Swift endorsement. And so that was an example. And then we started to do posts about using Taylor Swift audios and things like that.
That was a lot of what we were doing, was just being able to just pivot and quickly talk it out and then be like, okay, and lock in, create content as fast as you can and just get it out into the world. So.
Okay, yeah. All right, let's see. We'll go to the back over there. That back row with the young woman with her hand raised.
Hi. Wait, can you hear me? Okay, my name is
Wait,
Sydney.
is that on? Want to be sure it's on.
I think it's on.
No, it is. Okay.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm a political science and public relations double major. I was wondering if you guys know how much AI is going to have an impact on future campaigns. Not really sure if you saw it a lot in the 2024 election, but just wondering if you've seen any videos that were absolutely fake and how that's going to affect future campaigns.
I absolutely think that if 2024 was the podcast election, 2028 is going to be the AI election for sure. I think we're going to see a lot more, just as generative AI gets better, a lot more fake content. I mean, I still see this, or I see this today even, where it's just a video where I'm like, well, that's not even real, but people share it. I mean, it's very easy to fall for that stuff, and increasingly so. I'm sure you guys have all seen, I think really a pivotal moment was online, especially on TikTok specifically. There were these bunnies that were on this trampoline, and everybody fell for it, and it was really a collective moment where even Gen Z was like, whoa, what just happened? We all fell for it. So yeah, I definitely think that's going to be a big issue.
Well, you're going to be able to test ads immediately, right?
That's another thing. I think, a lot of the conversations around the deepfakes and stuff, which is obviously a very big issue, but it's also the tools, the things that allow you, it's going to make things move so much quicker. And I think we're at a point where social media is already moving so quickly, right? Like the amount of, the speed at which trends go by is so fast. It's going to happen even quicker. It's just good. We're melting our brains with these algorithms. And I think that AI is going to allow us as campaign professionals to be able to post even quicker. And just be more efficient.
You mentioned podcasts. We haven't talked about podcasts. The Joe Rogan moment, what do you think was the impact of that? I mean, there's that whole narrative about whether she agreed or wasn't agreeing, or all of that story about that. But what impact do you think the Rogan podcast had? And Call Her Daddy somehow didn't feel equivalent in some ways. Can you speak to that about Rogan and podcasts?
So, I think the vice president, she talked about it in her book, about sort of the logistics and the games that were played there. We weren't privy to that on our seat. That was not our team that dealt with the sort of partnerships, the online partnerships. But, it is an example of what we're talking about here, right? Which is Donald Trump understood the impact that would have. He understood that was going to reach tens of millions of, in particular, young men, but lots of people. And it's an example where I think Democrats find themselves often on their back foot when it comes to what's the next thing. And now you see, right, every Democrat's like, okay, now how do we get on the podcast? Which, great, that's awesome. I don't mean to dissuade that, but it's another example of Democrats sort of following the trend of the previous year. And I think Democrats need to find themselves ahead of the curve, right? Whether it's AI, whether it's live streaming, I think that's going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
So there's
live streaming events or
live streaming
like live.
There's a lot of streamers that will have guests on their
having them
streams
go on,
and be able. It's
having them go on streams.
Yes, having them go on streams, and I think that is a big piece of the podcast conversation. I'm sure that will continue, into 2026 to be something that electeds want to do and their teams want to have them do, is be a guest on these podcasts. I think that my thing about when I think about podcasts and the value that they hold in an election is kind of that you're playing a really long game with podcasts. So going on all different types of podcasts, all different types of streams from an early outset is because people think in these data points. I think that's really, really where the use case lies, is to be able to say, oh, okay, Zoran went on this podcast. I think Pete Buttigieg went on Flagrant podcast like a little while ago, and that was really a cool moment where you got to see him kind of just shoot the shit and talk about anything, not necessarily policy, and kind of like having that be more of like a long-term project as opposed to like, I have to go on a podcast because the election is, you know, coming up soon. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes. Let's see. All right. Let's see. We'll go to that man with his hand very highly raised.
Hello, my name's Joshua, and I'm a first-year political science student. And I guess my question is, when it comes to rapid response, how do you deal with like unfolding scandals? I guess, for example, like you worked with the DNC, and I remember how right after Biden had one of the worst debates in presidential history, they tweeted out, "Who's the winner of the debate? Biden." Or I guess from the Republican side, you know, when Signalgate was rolling out, you know, you had like Republican rapid response accounts challenging Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, to produce actual evidence and screenshots from the Signal chats. And then he did, and then that made it even worse for Republicans. And so I guess, how should rapid response people deal with unfolding scandals?
Well, I think it definitely, to your point, it definitely depends on the scandal. You know, it depends. So, you know, there are like real scandals that like really are earth-shattering, right, and like can change the course of elections. And then there are like, oh, like this account like posted something stupid, right? Like, and I think on the latter, that's an example where I actually think that Democrats need to stop worrying so much about those small little scandals. There's so much emphasis on, well, we can't post this one thing because what if it gets misinterpreted this way and then someone says something mean about it? It's just like everything moves so quickly that in those sort of like micro scandals, it's just like who cares? Like everyone's gonna move on in like 6 hours because we all have brain worms and we're like, you know, there's algorithms are like moving so quickly. So that has been always my thought process on some of these scandals, but obviously there are like real scandals that like you kind of have to, you know, get out in front of. And for those, it definitely depends on what it is.
Yeah, I think being a rapid response person, it's just very surreal to post through things in real time because it could be 5 minutes and a story has changed so much. And I think my kind of take is that, you know, like I am posting for whatever the moment is right then and there. And, you know, like whatever is prescient in that exact moment is not going to probably be relevant in another 20 minutes, but I'm getting, you know, whatever my narrative is out as it's happening. So I think it's definitely tough. But yeah, rapid response is very forgiving in terms of like, I think there's a lot of room to pivot.
Well, and you can also use social to create scandal. Like Arlie has been doing some great content around the Epstein files.
Yeah.
And Trump's refusal to own that and to release the Epstein files. So that's a good example of rapid response.
So are you doing that through the DNC?
So I post on Fact Post News. We have been posting, and the DNC as well has been posting, you know, Epstein-related content since Kash Patel, director of the FBI, went on the Joe Rogan podcast, I think it was in March or April, and totally just denied, you know, he said Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, and I've seen the files, we're not releasing them, there's no scandal here, just everyone move on from this. We were clipping that podcast and posting that really at the forefront of, like, not many people were talking about it yet. That was before the Elon Musk, you know, big falling out and everything. And so we were really able to like use that momentum and kind of string together this narrative over the better part of a year to get it to where it is now, which has really been fascinating to watch. I think, you know, now Ro Khanna has a bipartisan bill with Thomas Massie about releasing the Epstein files. So yeah, it's been very cool to see the ripple effect into real life.
Okay, I think that's going to have to be our last exchange. I've got a lot of people I want to thank here. I want to thank Isha Mehta, Abigail Montgomery, Lola Tovar, Gracie Gilligan, Lauren Davies, and the great team from KPU. From the School of Communication, Jacob Audouin, Tom Fish, Maz Wooten, Jada Brown, Sienna Ostermiller, Tia Millage, Julia Riera Pereira, and Ridi Rayana, our American Forum Fellow, Alana Parker, Kennedy Morgan and Peyton Anderson, Professor Larry Engel, Professor Joe Walsh, Wendy Malillo. Thanks, of course, to our wonderful Dean, Marnell Niles Goins, for your continuing support and your leadership. And most of all, thank you to our wonderful guests, Arlie Sugar and Parker Butler. Thank you.